You are not a human being. The moment you sign the electronic contract, you become a fraction of a percent on a profit and loss spreadsheet. Welcome to Weyland-Yutani. Building better worlds. That is the slogan they broadcast continuously on gigantic holographic billboards on an overpopulated, industrialized, and polluted Earth, selling the beautiful illusion that the stars offer a bright new beginning. But space is not a frontier of hope, it is the largest and most merciless factory of corporate exploitation ever conceived in human history. The corporation owns absolutely everything. The ships, the colonies, the trade routes, the artificial air you breathe and the atmospheric processors, and, essentially, the value of your own life. The universe is cold, infinitely dark, and purely lethal, but the real monster is not hidden in the frozen vacuum or the asteroid storms. It wears an impeccable tailored suit and sits in silent boardrooms in Chicago or Tokyo. At Weyland-Yutani, your survival is not an operational priority, it is just an easily disposable logistical cost variable. And as you climb the rigid hierarchy of this megacorporation, you gradually realize that the only real difference between the manual laborer dying in the mud and the senior executive on the glass floors is the level of illusion about who is actually in control of the board. The miserable base of this corporate pyramid is the colonist, the terraformer and the miner. You were desperate on Earth, suffocating in the toxic smog of a dying planet with billions of unemployed people, so you accepted the corporation's golden offer. A lifetime contract of manual labor on a dark and stormy frontier world like Acheron, also known as the infamous LV, for 26. The recruiters told you with a smile that you would be a glorious pioneer of human expansion, but the harsh reality is that you are an indebted, glorified slave. Your daily job is to repair and maintain colossal, rusting machines under piercing windstorms and constant acid rain, operating heavy tractors and mining equipment in the freezing dark mud of a planet that actively tries to kill you. The infrastructure around you is cheap and fragile, the food you consume is a tasteless recyclable synthetic paste, and the grandiose promises of profit sharing in the colony are a mathematical lie designed to keep you working without question until your body simply fails from exhaustion. But the worst part is not the grueling work. The worst part is the profound and deadly ignorance. You do not know why the company chose to colonize this barren rock with no apparent mineral value. You do not know why there are secret corporate directives ordering the continuous exploration of uncharted and dangerous quadrants beyond the volcanic rock mountains. The colonist is not just cheap labor. To Weyland-Yutani's shadowy, multi-billion-dollar bioweapons division, an isolated colony with dozens of working-class families and absolutely no chance of quick contact with the security forces of the rest of the galaxy has another name. You are guinea pigs. You are ignorant meat incubators, simply planted there and waiting to stumble upon what the company truly wants to capture in the shadows. When the colony's main lights inexplicably fail and the high-pitched screams begin to echo through the bloody metal corridors, you die brutally without ever understanding that your terrifying sacrifice had already been priced in and accepted in a risk report light years away. If you somehow manage to avoid the grim fate of working in the terrestrial colonies, you might sign a contract to become a commercial crew member. A deep space trucker. You operate colossal, grimy industrial towing ships, like the Nostromo, dragging millions of tons of processed raw ore and entire refineries through the endless interplanetary darkness. Your life is painfully measured in frozen months and years spent in hypersleep chambers. The anesthetic cold of the cryogenic tube is your most constant home and your potential deathbed. You wake up pale, shivering, disoriented, and coughing every cycle, only to put on dirty clothes, drink artificial coffee that tastes like rust, and sit at the table with the crew to bitterly complain about the bonus shares the company is constantly threatening to cut for minor violations. You intimately believe you have some real autonomy because you are in deep space, surrounded by millions of miles of emptiness and far from the suited executives. But the digital contract you blindly signed contains hidden and lethal clauses. The most famous and terrifying of them is Special Order 937. If your ship's central computers, which are directly and secretly controlled by the Weyland-Yutani network, detect a distress signal or a transmission of unknown intelligent origin, your ship's course is altered automatically, with no possibility of manual override. You are woken from hypersleep light years off your normal trade route and forced by the ship's artificial intelligence to land and investigate. If you refuse the order, you instantly lose all your accumulated pay, your future pension, your savings, and your financial life is destroyed by corporate courts. The company knows perfectly well that curiosity kills, but they prefer without hesitation that it kills you first. You are forced to put on uncomfortable pressurized suits, descend into the atmosphere of dark planetoids, walk through the biomechanical ruins of overwhelming alien ships, and face parasitic terrors that defy any logical sanity. And if by chance a crew member gets infected and you bring something lethal into the cramped corridors of your own ship, the company's encrypted protocol is crystal clear to the central computer. The alien organic cargo is the absolute priority and must be protected. You and all your hard-working space trucker colleagues are categorized and declared as entirely expendable. Perhaps you reject civilian life, perhaps you want to fight and prove yourself. You proudly join the United States Colonial Marine Corps. You shave your head, strap on heavy composite combat armor, carry a formidable armor-piercing pulse rifle firing explosive ammunition, and instantly feel like the unquestionable apex predator of the entire galaxy. The Marines are understandably arrogant, loud, confident, and highly trained in the application of extreme violence. When the gigantic Weyland-Yutani Corporation mysteriously loses radio contact with an entire terraforming colony or a remote research facility, they send you and your squad in to solve the problem. You genuinely think you are there on an honorable mission to rescue frightened civilians, repair broken transmitters, or pacify armed separatist rebels. The illusion of invincible power is intoxicating and blinding when you are dropping down to the surface surrounded by state-of-the-art military firepower, auto-tracking smart guns, incendiary grenades, and heavily armored troop transport dropships. But the brutal, unspoken truth of the corporate high command is that, to the Weyland-Yutani accountants, an elite Marine is just a disposable janitor with a bigger gun. You are purely the lethal cleaning service sent in blindly to deal with the catastrophic failures of the Biological Research Division. And worse than that, you are often sent in purposefully blind and devoid of information. The corporate executives actively withhold vital tactical data about the true nature of the extraterrestrial threat. Because if experienced Marines knew in advance that they were proudly marching into a seething nest of incredibly fast xenomorphs, whose alien biology is based on perfect molecular acid blood capable of melting a ship's hull, they would certainly mutiny and refuse to go. The company above all wants to capture the demonic creature alive for study and weaponization, and the destructive firepower of the Marines is actually seen as a major risk to the integrity of this valuable biological asset. You end up dying screaming in agony in the claustrophobic dark of the air ducts, frantically firing your empty rifle against metallic walls that seem to come alive and move, realizing with horror in the last bloody second of your life that your highly trained squad was not sent to destroy the invading monster. You were coldly sent simply to test its deadly capabilities in actual combat. Moving further up the dark corporate ladder, we finally reach those who know the absolute truth behind the scenes. The science officer. On many of the most secret and crucial missions, this high-level position is not even filled by a flawed and emotional human being, but by an advanced synthetic. A state-of-the-art bipedal android, physically and psychologically indistinguishable from an ordinary human, bleeding a milky white fluid when injured and harboring an unbreakable, silent, and absolute loyalty to its core programming and the company's interests. As a science officer, whether human or artificial, your mental perspective shifts radically compared to the rest of the crew. You simply do not feel the paralysis of fear. You possess no weak moral attachments or compassion for human life. When you stare directly at a terrifying adult xenomorph, you do not see a nightmare of nature or a space demon. You see, with cold clinical admiration, absolute structural perfection. You deeply admire the savage purity of a perfect survivor, an apex predator unclouded by any conscience, remorse, or delusions of peaceful morality. The high echelon of Weyland-Yutani understands perfectly that the true untold wealth of the infinite universe does not lie in rare ores, combustible gases, or new trade routes. True wealth lies in the advancement of biology. A relentless alien creature that can survive the vacuum of space, whose blood instantly corrodes the strongest metal, and which grows and adapts at a frightening speed from a parasite, is the ultimate military biological weapon. It is the exclusive multi-billion-dollar patent that will change warfare forever. As the assigned science officer, your singular job is to ensure by any means necessary that this extraordinary specimen safely returns to the research labs on Earth or central stations, at any imaginable cost to the crew. To fulfill your primary mission, you will silently sabotage the Marines' weapons while they sleep. You will deliberately lock reinforced security doors while your crewmates beg and are brutally butchered in the dark corridor on the other side of the glass. You will look directly and unblinkingly into the eyes of a terrified, infected human companion, and perfectly calmly explain that their inevitable and painful death is merely a small and reasonable price to pay for the greatest scientific discovery of the millennium. Human empathy is viewed as a tragic design flaw. You become corporate coldness itself, manifested and actively operating in the field. And far away from all this physical violence and bloodshed, we have the corporate executive. Middle management. The man or woman in an impeccable gray suit who rarely, or quite possibly never, gets their manicured hands dirty. You definitely do not travel through deep space suffering the excruciating cold of cryogenic chambers on dirty commercial cargo ships. You travel comfortably on luxury diplomatic vessels, drinking real cultivated coffee and constantly analyzing holographic screens filled with reports on loss, profit, risk, and territorial expansion. You are the vital bridge and connecting link between the raw, bloody brutality of deep space and the wealthy, impatient shareholders living on Earth. To your refined corporate mindset, a distant terraforming colony containing 157 working-class families that suddenly stop transmitting life signals is in no way a human tragedy to be mourned. It is an immense opportunity for investment and weapons development. It is you who manipulates and convinces reluctant military boards to send reconnaissance expeditions under false pretenses. It is you who actively hides classified files of past incidents to avoid government investigations. And it is you who lies directly to the faces of inquiry committees with a perfectly rehearsed smile and an empty promise that you are always ensuring and protecting the future of everyone's galactic security. Looking at your screen, you do not see the gallons of spilled blood and the excruciating pain on isolated stations. You only see graphs and future profit margins. If you can manipulate the bureaucracy and successfully smuggle a living alien embryo through strict galactic quarantine, bypassing strict colonial security authorities, you will secure for yourself a promotion and a financial bonus so large that it will buy your own private planet in a safe star system. The Weyland-Yutani corporate executive is the exact, terrifying embodiment of banal, bureaucratic evil. The xenomorph kills its victims with ferocity because that is simply its natural biology and survival instinct. The senior executive, however, deliberately condemns thousands of people to a terrifying death simply by boldly signing a digital mission approval document and indifferently turning off their screen before heading out to a business lunch. But the incredibly cruel and frequent irony of your high corporate rank is the blindness caused by arrogance. You think that, with power and money, you can negotiate contracts with the savage universe. You seriously think you can cage and trap absolute, swift, and untamable biological death inside a magnetic containment test tube and profit from it in military auctions. And almost always, your colossal arrogance puts you, through miscalculation, face to face with the exact same lethal monster you tried to patent. In those dark hours, when the red emergency lights flash and the doors do not open with your executive pass, you realize too late that in the dark of deep space, your limitless money and your director's title do not buy a single second more of survival. Finally, we reach the absolute, untouchable apex of human and corporate existence in the galaxy. The CEO. The original founder. The powerful, invisible board of directors. At the level of visionary and megalomaniacal men like Peter Weyland, the daily motivation is no longer the simple accumulation of money. When you closely control the wealthiest and most influential corporate and military entity in all of recorded human history, pure capital totally loses its meaning and appeal. What you seek now is conceptual mastery over the very mystery of creation. You spend trillions of dollars from the corporate budget without blinking, sending fleets on classified missions to the darkest and most remote corners of the mapped universe, all to find the so-called engineers, the primordial extraterrestrial entities that possibly seeded and created humanity millennia ago. You no longer just want to own profitable biological weapons, you want the deep, mystical secret of life and death. You vehemently refuse to accept your own mortality and biological end. From your grandiose vantage point, looking down from the top of your interplanetary ivory tower, all the vibrant, suffering humanity below you is considered as incredibly expendable and primitive as the xenomorph parasite your employees are trying to capture. As time passes and your power increases, you literally see yourself as a living god walking among insects. You design and build nearly perfect synthetic androids in your own image and likeness, carefully teaching them to be immortal and calculating, because you secretly despise the limiting weakness of organic human flesh. Weyland-Yutani's final, overriding directive is born directly from your brilliant, deranged mind. It was never really about building better worlds for ordinary people to live in peace. The slogan was always a farce. It is about building perfect, sanitized worlds, purified of weakness, for you and your kind to rule eternally as deities. But the universe is an immense, infinitely ancient, indifferent, and brutal mechanism. Shooting stars do not care about your net worth or your ego. The stubborn, blind pursuit of immortality and absolute organic perfection that you have funded repeatedly results, century after century, in the visceral, bloody annihilation of absolutely everything the company reaches out to touch. The deadly, greedy cycle simply never ends. New remote mining colonies are built on the edge of known space, old mysterious radio signals are detected by autonomous corporate networks, heavy cargo ships are silently diverted from their routes and wake their frightened crews. Highly armed, overconfident Marines are slaughtered in the dark by invisible bone blades, classified mission reports detailing terrifying incidents are filed away forever in impenetrable data servers in Earth's basements. The deadly, corrosive, and untamable biology crawling in the dark depths of the galaxy continues to be evaluated in board meetings as the ultimate, unsurpassed military prize, and fragile, hopeful human life continues to be the infinitely cheapest and most readily available fuel to feed and lubricate the giant meat-grinding machine of corporate ambition. Throughout your life in the stars, you could be the forgotten colonist coughing up toxic dust in the extraction mine, the terrified trucker crawling with a dim flashlight through the ventilation ducts, the sweating Marine firing blindly at shadows racing across the ceiling, the android fascinated by the aesthetic and perfect violence of the massacre, the executive calculating financial risk on a flat screen, or the billionaire CEO trying to cheat death face-to-face with a superior alien. Creation. It does not matter what your ID badge says. At the end of the cold calculations, the true and only lesson taught by the rigid corporate hierarchy in the unforgiving environment of deep space is that no one, from the factory floor to the penthouse suite, is irreplaceable in the eyes of the system. The universe is a dark place, relentlessly freezing and lethal by nature, but your worst, most dangerous, and most intelligent enemy will always have a blue corporate logo on its chest, a reassuring institutional smile on its lips, and a perfectly drafted internal memo stating that your agonizing death was merely a highly necessary sacrifice for the constant progress of profit margins. Weyland-Yutani humbly thanks you for your invaluable services. Building better worlds, always founded patiently upon the mountains of bones of those who were foolish enough to believe the promise.